Hi, my name is Liz and this is the pink lookbook, the Chanel 255, the Hermès Birkin, the Lady Dior and all these Louis Vuitton bags. It seems like they are everywhere, but are all of them real? Some are, some not so much. The fake industry is probably as old as the original products themselves. In my previous video about the Louis Vuitton bag materials, I mentioned that the monogram canvas was actually created to prevent products from being copied. So we already see over 100 years ago, counterfeit products were a big problem for brands. And I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s when we walked through the streets of the holiday destinations or even by the beach, there were all these street vendors who showed the fake bags on blankets, and when police officers came by, they quickly wrapped everything up and ran away. Back then, the fake products were not that great. It was easy to spot that they were fake. Either the design was off, or the pattern was not that great, or there were even obvious spelling mistakes. However, also the fake industry has evolved and their products have become better and better, and there are rumors that in some cases, even the brands themselves can't tell if a certain product or bag, in our case, is an original or if it's a fake one. These fake ones are called superfakes because they come so close to the original product. Sometimes they even have serial numbers, which are also fake, of course. And even though they cost less than the original, they are still not that cheap. Nevertheless, the market of superfakes is booming. They can be bought via questionable websites, they can be bought via online groups, or even in person if you go to certain markets. I've done quite some research about this topic, and it seems that it can be quite a process to buy such a superfake. I found one article in the German newspaper Die Zeit where the journalist described how they purchased such a superfake online, and it started with an in-person contact. A person recommended them to a Facebook group. In this Facebook group, they got in touch with the seller from China, and then the seller asked them to purchase a certain amount of products, other products, not a fake bag, to cover up basically this purchase, and the purchase price equaled the amount for that fake bag. Then the fake bag was shipped to Germany, and the journalist had to hope that it was not held up by customs, because there can also be legal consequences. And another interesting thing that I found is a thread on Reddit called Repladies. I discovered that already a while ago. I think it was in 2021, and it's a group of ladies who are executives in New York, investors, even civil servants. They could afford the original, but for some reason they choose to buy superfakes. Either it is because they don't want to spend the money, or it's just funny to deceive others. It's quite interesting to also do some research on this Reddit thread. I find this whole development quite interesting. Just as a side note here, this is a non-sponsored video. I'm just sharing my personal opinion here. And I ask myself, why would you buy a superfake? And is it really worth buying superfakes? And what are the consequences if you buy them? Let's take a closer look. My first question is, why would you buy a superfake? And this is closely related to the marketing strategy of luxury brands. This marketing strategy builds on exclusivity. Not everyone can afford a Chanel 255, and we know that not everyone can walk into Hermès and buy a Birkin bag. Therefore, these bags have become kind of a status symbol. If you carry them, you may signal or want to signal, hey, look at me, I have made it, I can afford to buy such a bag. I'm good enough for Hermès that I can buy the Birkin bag. Needless to say, social media have fueled this type of consumerism. They also have enforced this strategy. And today, for many people, it's not enough anymore to show off in the real world. They also want to prove their status online on Instagram, TikTok, or other platforms. And this is also why we see so many logos at the moment. I sometimes compare it to the logomania in the early 2000s, and a lot of people can't afford, or they do not want to spend that much money on a bag. And what is this game ultimately about? It is about joining a very exclusive club, and maybe a superfake allows you to join this club, because nobody can really tell the difference. But can't they really? And I find this really interesting, because this brings me back to the question, why would you buy a designer bag or a superfake? Because ultimately a lot of people then buy luxury products not because of the product, the quality, the design, but they do it to impress others. And with a superfake, you basically fool others into believing a different status. So it's more about other people than what you really appreciate. So for me, this is not really a reason why I would buy a designer bag in the first place. I have a different approach here. I have mentioned this in previous videos. I do not really like logos too much, and for me this is also not a deciding factor. I usually do my research about craftsmanship, quality, sustainability, the philosophy of the label, the story of the founders or the designer. These are the deciding factors for me, and there are a lot of independent labels or smaller labels that create beautiful products. So for me it's not about the logo, for me it's about the beauty overall of the product that I purchase. Very often I hear this argument, the seller told me the bag is made in the same factory as the original, it's just done during off shifts, or it comes with minor faults, so it's as good as the original. And this is quite interesting because probably a lot of people play the game that I mentioned before, this social status game, but it's not really nice to admit this. So a good argument is always the quality and craftsmanship factor, which very often applies to luxury brands. Nevertheless, there's very often this argument about the big brands that they don't disclose information, or that they also don't treat people well, the people who work for them, or that they also don't really care about sustainability standards. And I find this quite sad about the luxury industry, because when we talk about luxury, what does it ultimately mean? It is about craftsmanship, it is about quality, and if you buy a certain product, you expect that also the craftspeople are treated well, that they are paid fairly, that there are good working conditions, that the product is sustainable, because why would you pay this price? But the problem is that recently, due to reasons such as globalization, profit margins, it has also become quite attractive for certain luxury brands to outsource their production, or also cheat a bit with the products, I would say, and live from a certain heritage, but maybe the quality does not really come up anymore to the expectations of the clients. And another problem is that a lot of the brands don't disclose their production processes, their supply chains. I talked about this in my previous video about the Fashion Transparency Index. They are far from being transparent about all of this. So I kind of understand where the question is coming from, or the argument is coming from. If I can't trust these luxury brands anyways, why should I not buy a super fake? Nevertheless, if you buy a fake product or these super fakes, you usually have to buy them via these questionable websites, groups with these practices that I told you are at these markets. So the issue is that there are even less standards that apply to these companies, because they usually operate in quite an opaque way. If you buy from an established company, you as a customer have some kind of recourse if something happens. There are warranties, there are after-sales services. I'm not discussing the quality of these after-sales services. This is a different story, but in general, you know who is the company, and in some countries there are also certain organizations that may help you to get your money back if the product is faulty, or where you can file a formal complaint. If you buy a super fake, what can you really do if something is wrong with the product? Let's assume the product arrives at your doorstep, you unpack it, and you realize that the bag doesn't look at all like in the pictures. What can you do? Can you contact that seller again? Will he be responsive? It's the same seller that made you cover up your purchase in the first place. There is no real after-sales service, and also the organizations that I mentioned previously will not be able to help you because this is a fake good, so you basically don't have any recourse. Furthermore, there's a much bigger picture to this. UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and the OECD estimate that the value of counterfeit products globally amounts to $250 billion US. This not only involves fashion fake products, but also fake products, for example, when it comes to pharmaceuticals or food. The issue with these fake products is that you as a customer know nothing about the companies producing them. We have no information about the working conditions, the sustainability efforts, the ethical standards, but it may be even worse than that. If you decide to buy a fake product, knowingly or unknowingly, you may even finance criminal activities, and these may include racketeering, money laundering, child labor, human trafficking, slavery, or even arms dealing or drug dealing. I often hear the argument from people who are interested in superfakes that also the big brands don't really look after their workers, or that they don't come up to certain standards, or that they also are involved in whitewashing. And this is a problem in the industry. That luxury today does not mean I pay a lot of money for a product, or I go to a certain brand and then I know that they come up to certain standards. Unfortunately, this is not the case. But I have an argument for this too. First of all, we as consumers have a voice. We don't have to buy from certain brands. Nobody forces us to do it. So if we decide not to buy certain products, we create some kind of pressure on the brands because the demand goes down, and then maybe the brand needs to rethink the strategy. And another thing that we can do with the brands is to contact them or call them out on social media, because they are registered companies. We know we can contact them via email, for example, or we call them out on our Instagram and tag them. I know this is not much, it's not groundbreaking, but it's still more than what we can do with the producers of fake goods. Because as I mentioned before, can we contact the seller again, or has the company disappeared afterwards? It is probably very difficult because these companies operate in very opaque environments. And this leads me to my next point, because in addition to this moral dimension, there's a huge legal dimension to buying fake products. In a lot of countries, counterfeit products are illegal. The landscape varies. In some countries, there are very high fines, even imprisonment. And this is something that you, as the customer, need to assess. If you decide to buy such a fake bag, for example, what is going to happen if you purchase it online and then it is held up by customs? Is it just not shipped to you? Will it be destroyed? Do you have to bear the costs? Or are there further repercussions such as fine or imprisonment? So this is also something that you need to think about when you consider purchasing such a super fake bag. And the same also applies in the offline or physical market. For example, you go abroad, you purchase a super fake and then bring it into your country. What are the things that can happen if you import such a super fake? Just as a side note here, I'm not a legal advisor or a customs expert. I'm just sharing the information that I found online. If you want to learn more about this topic, please consult a licensed lawyer or expert. Very often it is not very clear if it is a fake product or if it's the original, especially when we look at products online. In general, I would say if you really want to buy a luxury bag, buy it via an authorized reseller, because then you have an official receipt, you have the warranties and also the potential after-sales service, and you don't need to deal with these issues. And if you wish to buy vintage, also do your research on the one hand about the item itself, but also about the online platform, for example, also the boutique. If you can, involve an expert. And in general, I have one tip: if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And of course, I would also like to share my personal opinion on this. I do not buy super fakes or fake products in general. Firstly, the reason is that as a business owner myself, I don't want to support another company or organization that benefits from copying or even ripping off other people's intellectual property. Secondly, because of my professional background and my experience, I'm aware of the consequences regarding the fake industries, and I don't want to potentially fund criminal activities, as I mentioned before. And thirdly, as I mentioned before, I'm not too much into logos anyways, and if I decide that I want a certain luxury item, I usually do my research and then I save up and either purchase through an official reseller or I buy vintage. But in general, I would like to say that for me, luxury relates a lot to craftsmanship and quality. And there are many discussions online where people say a lot of the brands don't come up to these expectations anymore. Furthermore, a lot of people complain about the lack of after-sales services or snooty representatives. And as I said before, we as customers have an important voice and we can decide if we want to play a certain game or not. And at the moment, I have decided against it. Instead, I try to support independent labels, small brands, designers with an interesting point of view who also respect sustainability, ethical standards. There are so many out there. There are many beautiful products. If you want me to share more about these smaller brands and independent labels, let me know in the comments below, then I will prepare another video. And I have reached the end of my video and I'm really curious about your point of view. What do you think about the Superfakes? Would you buy them or have you bought them? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also head over to thepinklookbook.com for more fashion related articles, and don't forget to check out my fashion label Pelagona. And if you enjoyed this video, there's another one which you may find interesting where I explain the different materials used for Louis Vuitton bags. Thank you very much for watching my video and see you soon.